Welcome to Health Issues. I'm your host, Chris Sylvain, and we couldn't be more honored today. We have two very special guests, distinguished guests. They're actually from the National Weather Service. So right now in New Orleans, this is a show that you may want to listen to. It's very important. We have two great guests again. We have Mr. Frank Revitte, and he's right here, National Weather Service out of Slidell. And then we have Mr. Jamie Rhome, who's National Weather Service, but he's out of Miami, and he'll be catching a plane, so it'll work out good. Anyway, let's talk off. Mr. Rhome, first of all, you're an expert in storm surge. Tell us what is storm surge and why is this so important?
In its simplest form, it's simply seawater, the ocean water, being pushed inland by the winds of storm. And in most cases here in the Gulf of Mexico, it's a hurricane. The strong winds of the hurricane simply push the ocean inland, and it floods land that is normally dry.
All right. So the water's coming from the Gulf or whatever. Okay. And when you say storm surge, it's the height of the water that's coming?
Correct. You're essentially elevating the sea level by a large amount, and that goes inland. It pushes the water inland over dry land. Okay.
Now this is the deal. Why is it so complex?
Because there's so many factors that go into what changes storm surge. Storm surge is like real estate: location, location, location. It's very detailed in its impacts and where water goes. So think about if you took a glass of water and like poured it on a table. Okay. The way it flows on that table, you know, it can kind of flow around like little fingers like this. Right. And that's how storm surge works. It finds the lowest elevation, the lowest ground, and it kind of flows inland like that. And that's that sort of detail is very hard to nail. So,
so for the individual, that's usually the determining factor whether we live or die, whether we have damage or not.
Exactly. These details are critical in who gets wet and who's dry. But these details are also what makes forecasting it very challenging. And even worse, what makes communicating it even harder, because it's very hard to say, this house is going to get wet and this house is going to stay dry. Okay. It's a very difficult thing to communicate, and it goes beyond what we can predict.
So you can't have a regular scale of red, green, blue, or whatever?
If we could, my life would be so much simpler.
Well, why not? I'm still trying to figure out why not.
So if we had a storm surge scale, as some people have proposed, and so the scale would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right. A, B, C, D, E, or colors. So a given hurricane is coming, and we say this is a surge scale 3.
Okay.
What does that tell you?
You're right, nothing.
Does that tell you if your house is going to get wet?
No, you're right.
Does that tell you if you should evacuate?
Right.
It doesn't tell you anything. Right. If anything, it strips the information out of the forecast and gives you less information. And this is why we can't go forward with a surge scale, or this is why scales don't work with storm surge. Right. What we need to do is produce a forecast that says this area is going to get impacted by this much water. Okay. This area is going to get impacted by this much water. Right. And that's currently what the National Weather Service does.
Because that's different from wind, because wind you can just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and like, okay, we're all kind of together here.
Right.
But storm surge is so delicate depending upon the location.
Correct. Wind lends itself much better to be communicated via scale, and that's what the current Saffir-Simpson scale does. It is a wind scale. It tells you absolutely nothing about any of the other hazards in a hurricane.
That wasn't even designed for New Orleans in that type of area anyway, though.
It's a very good wind scale. It's a very good communication tool for wind.
Okay.
But it is a terrible tool for anything else. The other hazards, heavy rainfall and river flooding and storm surge and tornadoes, they don't lend themselves to be communicated via scale. You have to go in and say this area here is going to be impacted and this area here is not going to be impacted.
Okay, now when people are buying a home and looking at where to live, should the height of where they live make a difference in predicting storm surge? Like people talk about, well, I'm this high off of sea level, so I should be okay.
Fortunately, our models that we use to predict storm surge know that information. They know the height of the land, and that's one of the factors for predicting storm surge, is you have to have a strong account of the elevation of the land.
Okay, so then again, still, to me, it almost doesn't matter that much, because I could be sitting 6 feet off the ground, but if I'm in a high probability of a storm surge coming 12 feet, it doesn't even matter. I might as well be at sea level.
Exactly. Now see, you just verified why we can't have a scale. You said, my house is 6 feet, the storm surge forecast is 12 feet, so I know I have to do something. Right. But if I told you Category 3 or zone red or scale 5, that wouldn't tell you what you should do.
Okay.
You see the difference?
All right. So we're dealing with something too complicated to the point where, when that's what happened, the average individual, the information is so complex, whereas some kind of way it's not getting there, and we have to create a system where the complexity of this information is able to get to almost individualize to neighborhood. Should it be block by block, or should it be, you know, a what? You know?
Well, right now, the nature of science won't let us pin it down to a house. We're not good enough scientifically to say this house, not this house. So the way we generally do it, working with emergency managers, is we tend to do it based off communities. This community is going to be impacted, this community not so much.
Define community, though.
The community, it's going to depend on the local emergency managers. A lot of people use what we call hurricane evacuation zones or hurricane evacuation areas. And they'll order, let's say, for example, a mandatory evacuation of a given area. And that evacuation decision will be based off the forecast that's issued from the National Weather Service. In other parts of the country, you know, maybe they do it by counties. Some people do it by cities. Every place does it a little bit differently.
Okay, so you're out of Miami, so you're looking at the whole country then.
Correct.
Pretty much. So you just happened to be here when we had the show. That's really good. All right, but is there a big difference, and I have to throw this, between the issues of Miami, the issues of Pensacola, and the issues of New Orleans, Slidell, the Wrigley's, and all of this?
Absolutely. Every spot, and remember I said earlier, storm surge is like real estate, location, location, location. Okay,
we're going to take a break. Thank you so much, Mr. Rhome. Hey, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. We'll be right back in a minute.
America is turning over a new leaf. The SmartWay leaf from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The SmartWay leaf will help you identify environmentally friendlier cars and trucks that can save you money. These vehicles are certified to be more fuel efficient and produce fewer greenhouse gases. And look for renewable fuels to improve our energy independence. Follow the leaf to epa.gov/smartway.
Never speak to strangers. Don't give your name, address, or telephone number to someone you don't know. And always tell me if something or someone frightens you. These are rules we give our kids to keep them safe even when we're not around.
Did you know that the same advice applies to the online world of the internet? Children can be lured into dangerous situations even in the safety of our own homes. Please talk to your kids about how to stay safe online. For tips and information, go to www.ikeepsafe.org.
I took a trip to Elkhart, Indiana today. Elkhart's a place that has lost jobs faster than anywhere else in America. And the people who've lost them have no idea what to do or who to turn to. In fact, local TV stations have started running public service announcements that tell people where to find food banks, even as the food banks don't have enough to meet the demand.
Well, we're back again, and now with Mr. Frank Revitte. So let's carry on. Bring us right back.
Well, you know, storm surge is really complicated because, as Jamie was saying, just every area is a little unique, and the factors that affect storm surge are size of the hurricane. Okay. If you have a large dimension hurricane, it's going to create probably a little more storm surge than a small storm. Of course, the strength is important, but also the topography and the bathymetry. What I mean by the bathymetry is how the continental shelf slopes off. Like in the Gulf Coast area of ours, we have a very shallow continental shelf, so that if we have a hurricane here, it's going to produce more storm surge inland than an area where they have a deep continental shelf like Miami or Atlantic. They'll have more breaking waves. So every area is very unique, and that's one of the things the modelers do is they look at the topography of the land as well as how the continental shelf breaks off. So you got all these very complicated factors that go into the storm surge, and that's what makes the communication sometimes challenging. Another thing that got thrown in here was categories of hurricanes, right? We all kind of grew up with categories 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right. It was primarily a wind scale, okay? But with time, people assigned a certain value of storm surge associated with that. And we have found, especially, we went through Katrina, on a wind scale, it was only a category 3. Betsy was a 3, but it produced more storm surge flooding than you would normally expect from a category 3. I kind of call it out-of-the-box type stuff. Okay? So people got used to looking at storm surge assigned to a specific category, and they were kind of surprised when it got higher than that. So after Katrina, the Hurricane Center made a big effort to separate storm surge from the wind scale. So we really try to get away from that, but I think there are some legacy. People grew up with this. They have certain expectations. And this is something, what we're trying to do is education. We get out and do presentations, is talk about things like that. Okay. It's like, hey, the hurricane scale is a wind scale. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have this specific storm surge. We try to run models that look at more of the hurricane, the size, the forward speed, things are going to happen to talk about the storm surge. But that is certainly a challenging communication thing that we do.
You mentioned relating the hard sciences, meteorology, with the social sciences of communication. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, that's very important. We've seen this many times, is where, as a scientist, you think you're communicating the correct values.
Right.
But unless the person understands it, that's your challenge. Are they reacting? Are they making the correct decision with that information? So if I said 5 to 7 feet above normal, well, if I'm living a mile from the coast, does that tell me I'm going to flood or not to flood? So with science, I think, and the technology, we've been able, we're trying to make inroads in talking about, we think storm surge flooding is going to be 3 to 4 feet above ground level. Now that a person understands. 3 to 4 feet above ground level, more than you don't understand
no
that.
Sir,
okay,
no,
well, there's
no
good,
sir.
Good.
Zero means nothing to me.
Okay,
doesn't mean nothing.
All right, so these are some of the challenges that social scientists are working with us, the Weather Service, and looking at how to communicate risk. It's basically how to communicate risk, and also moving people off of the old paradigm of Category 2, it's going to produce this kind of storm surge. No, a Category 2, it could produce a higher storm surge than you think, or it may produce a lower. It just depends on how big it is, how fast it's moving, and other factors. So it's a very complicated thing, and there's many complications, and also just the pure science of where the hurricane's going to go.
Okay.
Yeah, you know. Many times we've seen people 2 days, 3 days in advance, the hurricane looks like it's going to go to Mobile.
Okay.
You wake up the next morning, it's coming right over us. So those are just there's a lot of challenges here. That's why we have to, sometimes what people say, we overwarn. We have to say this large area of the coastline could get hurricane force winds in 2 days, when only a small amount of the coastline gets hurricane force winds or hurricane conditions, because we're not sure if it's going to go to Biloxi or New Orleans. And it makes a big difference where you end up with respect to that hurricane, what kind of impact you're going to have.
You nailed Isaac.
Isaac was pretty good as far as at 2 or 3 days out. The early forecast had it going to Florida, Panhandle. Then the track shifted over. Most of the forecast models had this track shifting over. Yeah.
You nailed the storm surge. You nailed the wind.
Well, it was pretty good. Pretty good. I think we feel good about some of the science and just the general communicating that risk. It was only a tropical storm until it almost got to the coastline.
Okay.
It was a tropical storm throughout much of its life. It only became a hurricane as it was about 50 miles offshore.
See, everybody's a hurricane.
So that's very, I think most people have a preconceived notion that it's a tropical storm, not going to worry about it.
Yeah,
so,
barbecue.
Yeah, there you go. So we have to, those communication of risk and trying to get people's attention is important.
Let me throw out some of the things I heard people say. The storm sat over New Orleans for 20 hours. Is that true?
Well, it moved very slowly. It came south of the mouth of the river, okay, and just kind of inched very slowly, maybe forward speed of 3 or 4 miles an hour, very slow, south of Grand Isle. It took its time. And from our modeling, we always have known that a slow-moving hurricane, whether it's a strong one or a weak one, is going to have a big impact in our area, because a slow-moving hurricane allows water to push inland. Okay. It pushes it into the lake and up into the bayous and things like that.
Okay, so the side of New Orleans that it hit was worse than if it had hit on the other side.
Yeah, see, there's your complicating factor. If the storm had come more northwest and come up towards Slidell or Mississippi coast, New Orleans would have been on the west side. You would have had northwest winds. So you're right, the storm surge pattern would have been much different, very much.
Okay. How do we take that information? And I'm not picking on Times-Picayune, I've done it before, I'm not doing it now. They just had a big story when they listed all of the storms, from the worst ones, I think it listed by time period, and they had bets in all of them. But they all use the same wind scale.
Yeah,
that,
they do.
As you're saying, it's not as if it's irrelevant, but it's not even 50% of what we need to understand.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a very good point. It was good for when it's good for what it's useful for, and that's the wind. What we have, like everything else, we've learned more and more about nature and natural phenomena, and we know that we need to keep the Saffir-Simpson scale about wind, but we need to move forward.
Keep it?
Yeah, we need to probably keep it, because I think it's so ingrained that you have to have some kind of.
Everybody saw a Category 1, and we're out there barbecuing, and then realize that people have, could lose their lives.
One of the things that the Weather Service is looking at is having a storm. One of the things that's been proposed is a storm surge warning. Actually, having a warning talking about storm surge. So we'll have a Saffir-Simpson scale for the wind, and a hurricane warning, but we'll also have a storm surge warning potentially. This is something that's been talked about and proposed. And we'll see where that goes. But there's a possibility we'll have a warning for storm surge specifically. So that's being talked within the Weather Service and the Hurricane Center. So the person would know that the wind is going to be so strong, 100 miles an hour, and they know specifically that for their area the storm surge would be a certain height, and that they would have to evacuate or something.
Question. Now, you don't have to answer it, but I'll throw it out. Because of the complexity of the information and the various communities that it affects, should we take politicians out of this and let you guys speak to the community yourselves?
Well, I'm just going to talk about broadly how the process typically works. The Hurricane Center does some briefings. They do some national briefings. They also coordinate with our local offices. They talk to the media. We, at the local offices, we talk to we conduct briefings to the emergency managers, local decision-maker type people who brief their politicians and help them make decisions. So we do communication with emergency management at the parish and city and state level. So these are all things that are going to be talked about and examined. So we are in contact and briefing people. Yeah.
But you're speaking Spanish, and they come out speaking French.
Well, once again, we go back to the issue of how to communicate natural hazard and risk correctly. And we need to probably develop mapping, risk mapping, and things like that. So these are all areas are great discussion points and ideas that we can grasp and move forward on.
Okay, to keep us from barbecuing on the next Category 1 for the next storm coming up in another 2 weeks, What can we do?
Well, folks have to. We're still in hurricane season here.
Right.
Yeah. You know, we've had big hurricanes into the middle of October here, so we still have to be vigilant. We had a pretty good hurricane here, and it did a lot of damage. Folks should review their hurricane plans, what they were going to do, what they would do if we get a hurricane, another hurricane. They also need to look at the information closely, not just stop at category. But they need to say Category 1, winds of 90 miles an hour, and what's the storm surge? They need to look at that.
I'll be honest, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but you could talk for 3 hours. I still won't know whether to move or not. Telling me, I don't know how high my house is off the ground. I can care less.
In New Orleans, it is a special case because you got the levee system, people living outside the levees and things like that. So we will, we'll continue to do these briefings, but people do need to be reticent or aware of, just because it's a Category 1 or 2, make sure they understand the risk of rainfall, storm surge, and wind. So it's a multiple disciplinary thing.
I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
We just leave for everything. I mean, I'm serious.
Well, Category 1, the New Orleans area within the levee system, we had a lot of power outages, but minimal flooding. The rainfall wasn't too bad. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move forward, because we do have another storm probably coming. I mean, they're out there in the Gulf or everything else like that. But most deaths are because of storm surge, not because of wind. Yeah. Wind knocks trees down, and wind knocks power lines down. But that doesn't account for anywhere near the majority of deaths or morbidity and mortality that happens because of hurricanes.
Yes.
The real issue is the storm surge and flooding, and what else?
Yeah, when you look at the statistics, you hit on it. When you look at the long history of hurricanes, 9 out of 10 fatalities are storm surge.
Okay.
And the other thing is freshwater flooding. People
help me out.
Heavy rainfall.
Okay.
In our area, pumps can't handle it, overwhelms the pumping. People driving may drive themselves in a flooded ditch and perish. So we have to be careful of the heavy rain.
That's fresh
heavy
water.
Rain, freshwater flooding. That's like on the North Shore also.
Okay.
You get tremendous heavy rain, comes down, the rivers flood, gets people trapped, potentially loss of life also. Mm-hmm. So that's another issue. It's a very complicated thing. A hurricane has many hazards. Okay. Each hurricane's kind of a little different.
Okay.
We had a hurricane named Allison, didn't produce much wind. Tropical storm Allison back in '01 produced a tremendous amount of heavy rain, 20 to 30 inches of rain.
Okay.
Parts of Houston got flooded. We had big flooding in parts of around the Baton Rouge area and some river flooding. So every storm kind of takes its own little particular hazard and highlights it.
All right, because we're about to close, what is the most authoritative source of information? Should we go to the National Weather Service's website? Because you guys are not on TV.
Yeah, I mean, all I have to say is there's the site, the National Hurricane Center site.
NationalHurricaneCenter.com.
They are,
something.
National just go to Hurricane Center.
Hurricane Center. Google that, and we'll get that.
You'll get that, and they have the official role in the federal government of issuing the official forecast. You'll see the cone of air. There's storm surge information there. There's wind information there.
Okay.
At our local office in Slidell, you go to weather.gov and hit Southeast Louisiana, the map, and you'll go to our site.
That's not the Weather Channel.
That's not the Weather Channel.
No, the real deal is weather.gov.
Well, I mean, their Weather Channel, they do a great job. They work with us in promoting safety.
But the real deal.
Well, I want to promote our own website, weather.gov.
Right. Weather.gov is the authoritative site. You
for
guys,
the National Weather Service.
Because y'all have NASA and everybody else working with you. The entire governmental structure supports what you're doing, Miami and everything. And so everybody feeds off of you. Y'all are the original documents.
And we do rely on our media partners like Weather Channel and other local TV stations that help get the word out on forecast, safety, information like that.
Okay, just not to, again, name anybody, but on process flow, when you guys go back, do y'all monitor with the Weather Channel, the news, TV news meteorologists and the politicians are saying? Is there any loop that kind of checks what they're saying?
Our main loop that we have is when we're discussing, we do these conference calls with emergency managers, we will hear things going on, but we don't monitor most of us don't have time to monitor various media outlets, what they're saying. We do occasionally do interviews with them, but we don't, I can't monitor all the TV stations.
Okay, I will ask that, I think we need to ask that some kind of way you guys get the budget to monitor, because if y'all are the source documents, we speak from health, so whoever has the original research, this is what the government is saying, this is the therapeutic protocol. So for weather, if you guys have the real deal, then somebody's responsible for parroting what you say in a manner and spirit in which you're saying it, because that's not what's happening. So somebody has to make sure that what you're saying is matched by what everybody else says, and if since it's not happening, somebody has to be held accountable. I mean, you don't have to answer that, but somebody needs to go to jail.
No.
You know what I mean? Or get fined or something. You know, they can't just be saying all kinds of stuff.
I think our media partners do we do workshops with them, and they communicate the Hurricane Center message, I think, pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that's real good, but I'm speaking on our end. We saw from Isaac, and that's not, again, that's my point, not to want to put you in a position, I'm talking about process. The process, there has to be some where they're mean well and everything, but, this is life or death stuff that they're saying. The newspapers, everybody's a weather expert. You know what I mean? Meteorologists are not. And, people have to be held accountable. I believe that. Anyway, the show is over. Okay. Mr. Revitte, I appreciate you. We're thankful. We want to see more of you in some kind of way for the hurricanes. We want to make it happen where you guys are the source documents, and everybody needs to follow y'all and stay on it. Great job. Chris Sylvain, Health Issues, healthissues2010.org. We've got to get the right information. That's important. Hey, people mean well, but this stuff's important. Thank you. Have a great, great day.